Okay, Jules. Let's break this down a little bit. So I think we both seem to agree that Arsenal right now are unlikely to be able to challenge City this season.
Over the length of the season, yeah, it's hard to
And you
say.
said that the squad needs to be deeper. Fair enough. I mean, I think they have a squad built for the European competition in which they play.
Yeah, they have a good squad.
Simple as. What I'm not 100% clear on, though, and I have to hold my hand up about Gabriel Jesus. I'm still not 100% sold that he is the answer in terms of a goal-scoring center forward, even though obviously he's got, 5 goals this season, which is the number of goals that Erling Haaland scored this morning. I'm just kidding. But I do wonder a little bit, though, about sort of projecting forward, the type of football that he plays. I felt in this game, they were closer to the type of football that City plays in terms of what they tried to do.
There's a lot of similarities, really.
What are the differences? That's what I'm interested in.
I think a bit of quality. You have to be, honest here.
Partey's not Gundogan.
No. I mean, they don't have a De Bruyne. They don't have a Haaland, of course. They don't have Cancelo either. I can understand why what Arteta is trying to do. Well, with Zinchenko, it's easy because he kind of was born in it.
Right.
But with Ben White, even to try to have the inverted fullbacks and then for them to play in a different way than a more traditional right back, for example, for Ben White. But it's still not there yet.
With Ben White at right back, I thought what he was going to do is kind of do the 3.5 defense, right? So, in other words, he sits, Zinchenko moves into midfield to build play.
Yeah.
He didn't really do that. And I almost felt that, that's what Spurs were expecting. And part of the reason Ben White was so effective going forward in this is that Spurs, it was a curveball for Spurs. It kind of messed them up. They were kind of expecting, okay, when Arsenal get possession, they're going to revert to a back three. Zinchenko's going to come inside. And I really thought it caught them off guard.
Yeah, a little bit. And also it forces, obviously, Richarlison on Zinchenko and then Son on White to do even more defending. Son, just briefly on Spurs, had a big job to do defensively, which was that every time Saka got the ball every time Saka had the ball and was 1v1 against Perisic, Son had to sprint literally to come and make a 2v1 for Spurs. Start of the second half, he's a bit too slow to do it, and then Saka has the shot that leads to the Gabriel Jesus goal, for example. So it was a clear plan. But obviously, if White is there, there's even more reason for Son to come back and defend. The problem is, when Arsenal lost the ball a couple of times in the first half especially, then both Zinchenko and White were so high that it was Saliba and Gabriel against, at times, Richarlison and Perisic, Kane, Son, all of that, which could have benefited, I think, to Spurs. But the difference between City right now and Arsenal, despite all the similarities, and there are a lot of them, and rightly so because Pep worked 3 years with Arteta, is still a bit of quality, of course. It's still a bit of know-how on, don't get panicky in a way when it doesn't work. Keep going, keep doing the same things. And I think at times there's a lack of urgency for Arsenal that there isn't with City. And Arsenal at times is still a bit of we pass the ball, but there's not much end to it or purpose in it. With City, there's always purpose.
I think this is the biggest difference. And I haven't looked at the numbers. I'd love it if somebody out there who's deep into analytics goes against numbers in this. But it feels to me like Arsenal's passing right now. And, look, football ultimately, when you think about it, right, is about creating overloads and creating space so that somebody can run in there and take a shot on goal, right? Or that you can cross the ball for somebody waiting in the middle. And very broadly speaking, you either do this, there's 3 ways you do this, right? You either force a mistake from the opposition, whether by pressing or whatever. You either pass the ball effectively to move people around, move them out of place, or you simply go and beat an opponent. You do it with an individual run. You run at somebody, you take them on, and you create an overload. I feel that with Arsenal, right now, they're much more effective in that latter part. They press well. Obviously, you're not going to press much against Spurs because Spurs were sitting really, really deep, right? So you wouldn't really judge them on that. The passing side is where I think there's a lot of room for improvement. one of the arguments in the modern game is that, it's a lot more one-on-one oriented than it is collective oriented. And obviously City under Pep have that in their locker too, because Grealish, Sterling, back in the day, Foden, all these guys can do the one-on-ones. But is that the difference? Is that Partey and Xhaka cannot give you right now, and maybe never will. Odegaard, slightly different. Can't give you what De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, David Silva before him. They can't give you that.
Yeah, I think so. There's also, I think the use of half spaces that is obviously City do it so well, better than anybody else. And I think Arsenal are trying to get there. We saw Xhaka, not so much in this game because
there's no half spaces when
there's no space at all. I mean, I was really, the first half where I was sad was on the kind of half of the pitch where Arsenal were attacking. And I have to say, and I'm going to be quite critical of Conte later, but I have to say I was really impressed by how well they defended, and that line of 5 and the line of 4. And I know, as we always say, it's easier to put in place a very strong defensive team and very efficiently than to put together a very efficiently attacking side, because it's much harder to find patterns of play when you attack than when you defend and when you don't have the ball. But they were so good at it. Apart from the Partey goal, where they give him too much space, and that's the problem about playing deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, is that if you don't come out and close people down quickly when you're too deep, then you leave that kind of space for someone to shoot. He can try another 99 times and he's not going to score. Although we talked about XG of that goal
96 times if your XG count was accurate.
True. 0.04. However, XG on target for a shot from there is 0.34. Which shows that if you hit it well and on target, usually it goes.
Well, not usually. 1 out of 3 times it goes in.
But still, more often than when the, which I thought was interesting.
You're listening to the Arithmetic Podcast with Gab Marcotti and Julien Lawrence. A final word on Arsenal before we get to Spurs, and this is kind of inside baseball in the weeds, but I have several friends, including my buddy Mike Feinberg, who I played football with, who are way, way deep Gooners.
Yeah.
And they've been talking about Tim Lewis. There's a certain subset of supporter who loves the machinations behind the thing. And they've been talking about Tim Lewis as if he's their mate and they know him and stuff like that. I know you know who Tim Lewis is. I've discovered who Tim Lewis is.
Yeah.
To the general public, who is Tim Lewis and why should Arsenal fans care who he is?
Because he's, I think, one of the directors of the club, I think, to put it simply. He's very close to the Kroenke family. He's worked through the businesses of the Kroenke family.
Josh or Stan?
Both of them. He's very close to both of them. They trust each other. They trusted Tim to come to the club.
Please tell me he's not another lawyer.
I
think he is, yeah. But go ahead.
And he basically, he's also a big part of why Arsenal are much better now, where there's a lot of positivity around the club, because he helped with the way the club has been running. He helped as well Vinay Venkateshan, for example. I think he helped with the dynamic of the club. I think he's quite close to some people at the club. I think he has a vision in terms of, business-wise. He's very good at all business things. He's a very intelligent guy, but also at what it takes to make something work and something win.
So the report I saw said that he was kind of an external guy to Arsenal, but who worked for the Kroenkes and sort of advised them on Arsenal and stuff like that. Yeah. But the report I saw says that now he's kind of quit his day job, as it were, and his sole focus is Arsenal.
Yeah, I don't know I don't know about that in terms of if it's 100% Arsenal and everything, but he's been very, very present in the last, I would say 2.5 years, maybe more. I don't know exactly, but he's been very influential and very important and very present and hands-on, really. Whereas I think at the beginning, maybe it was just like go to the club, have a look, see what happens, see what works, what doesn't work, and then report to the Kroenkes. Now I think very much is a big part of what the top of the club is doing.
All right, let's get to Spurs. Part of me says, all right, it's the North London derby. You got to play the derby and not go with this game plan of sitting back and defending. And I've made the point that very few teams are successful doing that. I don't think it's the only way Spurs know how to play. I think they can beat you in different ways. Equally, if I have those three, Richarlison, Son, and Kane, in a game like this where I know Arsenal are going to play a certain way, I don't see anything wrong with really emphasizing the counter more than the build-up. I don't see anything wrong with I win the ball, and rather than trying to get the whole team to step up and turning it into, to use a basketball analogy, a half-court game, getting the ball forward quickly. The problem is those three were pretty imprecise in transition.
Yeah.
And Arsenal defended the transition. I thought they defended it well. I don't think it's just a case of Son and Kane misplacing their passes.
Yeah, no, what I thought watching the game was like, I get the game plan, and maybe on another day it works. I don't know. He's worked before, and Conte certainly is very good at this kind of game plans. I just thought with the players that he has, and again, let's not forget that Kulusevski was injured, Lucas Moura was injured. The only attacking player on the bench was Bryan Hill, who was never going to come on. I mean, I don't even know why he was there. So it's difficult if you go behind to change something to make, like, you can't bring on Richarlison like you did at Chelsea, for example, where you were lucky to get a point, but still, when you brought him on for the last half hour, something changed, the dynamic changed, and you came back into the game.
You can't use Kulusevski's absence as
No, but it's true. It's true that if you only have Bryan Hill on the bench,
so you bring on Sessegnon and move Perisic further forward. Like it's not.
Okay,
it's not like
still,
it's ooh.
No, but what I mean, but despite that, so my point joined yours, I find it in a way outrageous that they don't play more football. I cannot understand it, Gab. And I promise you, I think this Arsenal team could also struggle against a team that plays and against a team that plays well. Yeah. And I think as good as Arsenal are on the ball, and you don't want to give them too much space, I get that all. But they would also struggle against a team that move the ball. And I expect them to struggle against the Brighton team, against City team. Let's see next weekend against the Liverpool team, even in crisis. Because I think they can also struggle a bit like that. And yet, you just left them the ball. I mean, I'm not even going through the substitutions when you're 3-1, like when you're 3-1 down. I mean, I don't know why it takes him so long after the red card to change something to start with, and then to give up on the game when you're 3-1 down with 20 minutes to go just because you're down to 10 men, and you take Son off, Richarlison off, and bring Sessegnon, Bissouma, whoever the other dudes were. I'm like, why? Because if I was a Spurs fan, I would be mad at Conte for doing that.
I think at that point, and this is something that you're seeing creep in a little bit, there is such a concern about the congested fixture list. And like, we're going back to maths here, right? If I take those 15 minutes away from I forget what minute Son came off, but right? But
20 minutes to go.
20 minutes to go, okay. So 20 minutes, that is roughly what, 22% of the game, 23% of the game, right?
Yeah.
I've reduced the chances of him picking up an injury, a muscular injury, whatever.
Okay, so you give up on trying to get a point even in the game.
Because at that point I've accepted my chances. I'm playing the percentages.
Yeah.
And my chances of getting back into the game are lower, with 10 men, at that point are lower than the chances of something bad happening, which is then going to hurt me further on. I genuinely think this is the calculation. I mean, I don't.
Maybe. I just don't think that's good enough.
I don't see the reason in it. I mean, the alternative is you bring on more attacking players, you take more chances with 10 men against 11. But, there's numbers that tell us. I'm not saying Conte is, a guy who simply sits there and he's got an analytics nerd in the closet and wheels them out. Like, we see again, like in the NFL, who should we go with it in fourth down? What does the chart say? Whatever. But I just really think at that point, they said, let's take the L, let's move on, let's sort things out in the Champions League and in Europe.
Maybe your defense on that.
This is the thinking that comes into it.
Okay, what's the thinking about waiting? It's almost, I think, 8 minutes between the red card and the third goal, and the substitutions. When you could have red card for Emerson, you said, okay, straight away. And I think Sessegnon is actually ready to come on, and he waits and waits and waits and waits. And then there's the third goal, and after that he said, okay, let's change everything. I don't understand because at 2-1, if you bring Sessegnon straight in for Richarlison,
you got fresh legs or whatever, maybe you can
still play your 5 at the back, and then you play 3 and then 1 with Kane on his own.
I cannot answer that, Jules. I cannot answer that. Only Antonio Conte
can
answer that. But you're right. I was surprised by that as well.
And I mean, just to finish, Saliba, what a player!
You've been championing this guy for years and years.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.